different methods, including drum magazines, box magazines, assault rifle magazines, ammunition belts, and linkless feed systems. In linkless feed systems, the rounds are carried on a kind of looped conveyor belt to the gun. Theoretically, belts can be of any length, but generally there are between 200 and 250 rounds. Any longer, and the belts could twist and jam. To avoid problems with the belts, machine gunners usually have a soldier feeding the belts for them, unless they are the sealed type, as used on the SAW. During Vietnam, it was common to see Huey door gunners with used tin cans beneath their M60's ammunition feed tray to minimize belt jams. This technique was crude, but effective. In the past, canvas ammunition belts were prone to rotting away in hot climates. Modern belts tend to use disintegrating links. Each round is connected by a small metal clip, which falls away as the ammunition is consumed. The only drawback with this method is foreign debris damage, which is a particular concern in helicopter-based operations. As the gun is fired, the used cartridge cases are usually caught in a bag, but it is harder to catch the small metal clips, which can fly around the cabin and cause some damage. Machine guns are mounted on almost every type of vehicle in modern-day combat operations. Even supply trucks usually carry them. British and U.S. forces make good use of heavily armed vehicles in Iraq and Afghanistan and mount both M2 50 caliber HMGs and 7.62mm medium machine guns on them. This combination of firepower makes these heavily armed vehicles lethal in combat. During infantry-based operations, medium and heavy machine guns are often set up in a tactically advantageous position before an attack is initiated. These weapons usually belong to the fire support group and are tasked with suppressing enemy heavy weaponry and defensive positions prior to the final assault phase. Tracer rounds are used to mark the fall of a shot because most attacks are carried out at night. U.S. forces and their allies use red tracer, whereas most other forces use the green. Generally, 1 in 5 rounds is a tracer. When firing a machine gun, gunners tend to use short bursts to ensure accuracy and to conserve ammunition. This also prevents the barrels from overheating. Firing a machine gun looks easy. Just aim and pull the trigger. But it's not as simple as that. Firing and operating a machine gun requires skill and good judgment. The gunner must constantly assess the tactical, review his selection, and prioritize his targets. The trigger is never pulled, as this would move the weapon offline and force the operator to reacquire his target. Instead, the trigger is squeezed. If a machine gunner is lying on his stomach, he must dig the toes of his boots into the ground to prevent the recoil from pushing him back, which will lose the target. An expert operator also learns how to control his rate of fire. If he fires too quickly, he will miss the target and overheat the barrel or cause the belt to jam. A machine gunner is extremely skilled at engaging his target. Unlike rifles, machine guns are area effect weapons, and a machine gunner has to use different aiming methods from those used by the rifleman. When acquiring targets on the ground, the gunner aims slightly off the direction of the target and watches the rounds as they impact. From this point, the rounds are then walked onto the target directly. When acquiring water targets, again, the gunner aims off in front of the anticipated direction of travel of the vessel that he is targeting. As the rounds splash into the water, they raise small water spouts which tell the gunner exactly where his bullets are going and enable him to adjust his aim onto the target. As the water spouts upward after impact, the gunner readjusts his fire accordingly. Aerial targets are the hardest to hit, as the aircraft or helicopter being fired upon is traveling extremely fast. In the case of a modern fighter, by the time the gunner has aimed and fired his weapon, it is too late. The aircraft has already disappeared or dropped its ordnance on the gunner's position. The gunner must anticipate the aircraft's line of flight and fire his rounds in front of where he thinks it is heading, so that the rounds reach the aiming point at the same time as the aircraft. This is known as leading the target. When firing a machine gun during an assault, it is important that the gunner adopts a good firing position, or he may become a target himself. These are the 4 main firing positions. In the prone position, the gunner lies flat on the ground on his stomach, which gives him the most control over a weapon and makes him a smaller target. The kneeling position is good for firing quick bursts when the gunner is moving under enemy fire. It also makes the gunner less of a target when stopping to engage the enemy. A standing position is used when the gunner wants to stop and engage a target suddenly during a tactical advance in a high-threat environment. He has to lean forward to compensate for the recoil. Lastly, the gunner can also fire from the hip. This position is usually used during the final phase of an assault, when the gunner wants to put down covering suppressive fire. Carrying a medium or light machine gun around all day is not an easy task, and it is not always practical for certain missions, such as shipboarding. In these scenarios, the submachine gun is the best choice. The submachine gun is basically a small handheld machine gun firing low-powered pistol rounds. These are much easier to control in automatic fire than the powerful rounds fired by larger machine guns. It provides both firepower and compact mobility. One of the best weapons in this class is the 9mm Heckler & Koch MP5, which is a firm favorite with U.S. Special Forces. Sometimes what is required is maximum firepower, and at other times a smaller and more compact weapon is best. Submachine guns are only one of the many varieties of automatic weapons which have come into use in the last 100 years. The original hand-cranked machine guns were large, heavy devices, often mounted on light artillery carriages. The first true machine guns were smaller and could be carried into action by a team of 2 or 3 men. Since then, machine guns have ranged from weapons small enough to be carried in a coat pocket to huge multi-barreled devices mounted on aircraft, helicopters, and armored vehicles. Whatever their size and mission, all machine guns share one thing, and that is the ability to fire a lot of rounds in a very short time. It is that ability which makes the machine gun one of the few weapons in history that has changed the face of warfare.